I mean, a lot of things. Look, when we decided to launch ChatGPT, we thought it was going to do well, but we had no idea how well it was going to do. And we thought the models we knew they were going to be great eventually, but we didn't think they were good enough to resonate like ChatGPT and GPT-4 have. And so I think one piece of knowledge is that this technology, even with all of its current limitations, is far more useful than we thought and can integrate into our lives in a much more valuable way than we thought. And so now that we know that, as we think about launching the next much better models, we come with a different perspective. I learned something about important and urgent problems and not letting the important but not urgent ones fester. I learned something about board members. I learned a lot of things.
And indeed. Do you think you're going to behave differently this year as a result of what you learned? Like what, you mentioned the technology. Technology clearly taking off faster. What, everyone's making New Year's resolutions. Do you have a New Year's resolution?
I mean, I have like the same vague ones as always, but I don't have a here's the thing I'm going to go get done in 2024.
All right, well, let's shift to the technology. I've been covering Silicon Valley and tech for 25 years. I've never seen a technology that has advanced as quickly as AI is advancing. Usually, even, the dawn of the internet, e-commerce, the smartphone, those took years. You had early adopters, then you had, mid adopters. Yeah. This, everyone can use immediately. And you said yesterday that even you can really only concretely know what's going to happen a few steps ahead. But let's talk about those few steps. Talk about that bit that you can see. What can we expect AI to do this year that it couldn't do last year?
There are all these things that we can happen, and I'd love to talk about sort of all the specifics, but the general principle, I think the thing that matters most is just that it gets smarter. So GPT-2 couldn't do very much. GPT-3 could do more. GPT-4 could do a lot more. GPT-5 will be able to do a lot more. And the thing that, or whatever we call it, and the thing that matters most is not that it can, have this new modality or it can solve this new problem. It is the generalized intelligence keeps increasing. And we find new ways to put that into a product. We find new ways to use it. But that is the higher order bit. I think that dominates everything else in the importance, is that the overall capability of the model, its overall intelligence, its ability to do longer, more complex problems, more accurately, more of them, that is increasing across the board. And that to me is one of the few things that make this totally different from any previous kind of technology.
And let's talk kind of this year, what we can expect. Do you think most of the gains will come from new, more powerful models, or the fact that we now have so many more people developing on the models for this year?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously it'll be the multiplicative factor of both, but if history is a guide for us, it is the more advanced model that is the most important step forward. So I think I would expect that to be the biggest gain again. But as it does get integrated into people's workflows in all these new and different ways, the productization is critical. Like we started off as a research company. Now we understand that we have to treat both research and product as both critical. And it's the fact that we can do both of those things that I think makes us a special company.
And what do you think concretely we'll be able to do that we haven't been able to do? Like, what are some of the limitations that you think this will be the year we overcome these? Not just you, Sam Altman, and OpenAI, but kind of the industry. What are some of the things that are on the cusp of being solved? Whether it's hallucinations because of better grounding, whether it's merging AI with company data or specific data sets.
So that's a good one. I think access to specific data and the ability to use specific data in a much better way for more relevant, more context-aware work. I think that'll get much better this year. I think there's all sorts of the current stuff that people complain about, like the voice is too slow and it's not real time, and that'll get better this year. I think where we're headed, and then I'll talk about this year, is we're headed towards the way you use the computers to talk to it. The operating system of a computer, in some sense, is close to this idea that you're working inside of a chat experience or an AI experience, and you get to your computer, and rather than go open a browser and type in Gmail and look through your emails or whatever, you might just say what were my most important emails today? Can you respond to all of those? I'll see these. Go find this thing there and send it there. So we're heading towards this new way to kind of do knowledge work. Like this is, I think with every great technological revolution, we do get an opportunity to use a computer in a new way. And we won't get all the way there this year, but I do think we'll see people do more and more of their workflow inside of a language model, for lack of a better.
I was going to say, do you think, and I imagine this seems reasonably likely to me, last year at Davos, everyone was playing around with ChatGPT. All the CEOs realized it could create a buzzword-laden speech just as well as they can. This year, they're all trying to figure out how they do it with their business. But one thing, it's still an app that people open some of the time. By the end of the year, do you think people will be spending hours a day within some sort of AI assistant?
Well, some classes of jobs already do. Like programmers, many programmers already do that. And I think that's a reasonable advanced look at what may happen to more people. So yes, I don't know exactly what the format it'll be. I don't know if it'll I don't know quite what this new computer of the future looks like, or this new AI operating system looks like. But by the end of the year, I would certainly say it's a safe bet that more people are doing their work in one of these experiences. And it's not just this thing you launch a few times a day when you have a question or need your buzzword speech written.
And what won't we see this year? What are some of the things that AI will do down the road, but beyond sort of the robots taking over science fiction stuff? What are some of the things that absolutely will come that we'll want, but are more than a year away?
The single thing that I think is most important to me about what AI will do for us is help vastly accelerate the rate of scientific discovery, make new scientific discoveries increasingly autonomously. I don't think that's a this year thing. But I think when that happens, it's a huge deal.
And I want to talk some about human creation and the human creations that have gone into training these systems. Obviously, a lot of discussion around copyright and intellectual property. You've signed a bunch of deals, OpenAI, with publishers like the AP, Axel Springer. If what you've done to date of training on the open web is fine, why do you even need to sign these kinds of deals to license content?
What we're interested in is not data for training, which we could talk about later. There's some value to that, but what we really want is when people are using ChatGPT and ask what happened today at Davos, we'd like to be able to display trusted, branded, high-quality content at inference time. And that's been the focus of these deals, not training.
Okay, but when it comes to training, do you still believe that it's reasonable to train on anything that's publicly available?
I wish I had a easy yes or no answer for you on that. I think it depends. There's many cases where we think it is. There's many where we don't think it's the right thing to do, legal or not. For example, we respect opt-outs in the spirit of being a good neighbor, even when it's clearly totally legal for us to do it. And, I think that's a good thing to do. Now, one of the tricks to all this, by the way, is let's say you are the New York Times or somebody else. We can respect an opt-out to not go look at, train on your content. But New York Times content has been copied and inappropriately or not attributed all over the web. And so when we're reading the web, there will be New York Times articles not identified as such on random articles that say please, on random sites that say please train on my data. So to be able to ensure that we don't that we're sort of a good neighbor, one of the things that we think is important to happen is no matter what we train on, and we'll try to respect it as much as we can, but the internet is a weird place. No matter what we train on, we don't want to regurgitate someone's copyrighted content. That feels clearly not good to us. And so we're working to drive that as close to zero as we can, and we have made huge amounts of progress with new technology there.
And that has to do with what gets surfaced in terms of how you train models. And the courts are going to settle a bunch of these. You guys are facing lawsuits, others are. Are you prepared to, if you have to, build a model that's trained only on stuff that's clearly public domain or licensed?
Yeah, again, I think everyone is convinced my data is so great. We cannot imagine you can make an AI without the New York Times training data. Now, we're happy to include New York Times training data if the New York Times would like, and there are many other partners who want us to, but we don't need to. And in fact, as these models get smarter and better at reasoning, we need less training data. If you just think about your own experience, probably no one in this room has read 2,000 biology textbooks. The 2001st, if you had, it's not going to help you that much. What you want is a small amount of super high quality data and to think really hard. So huge amounts of data are going to continue to be important to us. There's lots of good ways we can get that from clearly open domain data. And then increasingly, I think the models are going to think harder about a smaller amount of known high-quality data. And if people don't want us to train on their data, no problem.
Do you have a model in the labs that's trained only on stuff that you know you have a right to?
I appreciate for sure the effort to get me to talk about a model in the labs, but we never do that.
Okay. We'll move on to another easy topic, democracy. OpenAI announced a variety of efforts just in this past week about securing democracy, working with other groups to help secure democracy, your own efforts. With so many elections around the world this year, including, of course, the US presidential election, how confident are you that OpenAI's technology won't be used by either campaigns or outside actors to influence the election?
It's one of our top worries for the year. So we put this stuff out. We want to get way ahead of it. We know this is going to be important. I think in any election, people are tempted to fight the last war and put their effort into what happened last time and try to mitigate that. My expectation, although it may be wrong, is that this time around there's going to be new challenges, and we've got to really be prepared in addressing those. And we don't yet know what all of them are. We have some ideas, as you mentioned. We published a lot of stuff yesterday, but we really just want to have a very tight feedback loop, careful monitoring, be willing to make changes quickly if we notice anything, and work with the broad ecosystem of partners to do the best that we can. But I'm nervous about this, and I think it's good that we're nervous about this.
And still, I mean, there's only a handful of people whose job at OpenAI is really dedicated to election stuff. Meta, TikTok, they have hundreds of people. They probably have more people than you have in your whole company.
I don't know the number, but we have a lot. We are taking this quite seriously.
But you only have 500 employees. You can't have
800, I don't know, 700. I don't know the exact number, but more than 500.
But you can't have hundreds of people just on elections, right?
Look, there are a lot of companies that have teams of hundreds of people that do less than teams of 4 people do at a competently run company. So I don't think that's the right metric. We will put a lot of effort into this.
You also announced a change in policy that allows OpenAI models to be used by militaries. Why did you make that change?
Because what we tried to do is say, here's what you can't use the models for, rather than here's this group of people that can't use it. There were parts of the Department of Defense that had, I think, super legitimate, super good use cases for our models, and a blanket saying, anyone whose address ends in .mil can't use this, I think is bad. I'm a very proud citizen of the US. I'm a huge supporter of liberal democracy continuing to do well. We don't want our models being used to make kill decisions, of course. But there's a lot of other stuff that the military does that's quite important.
And you've got some great use cases that you talked about, helping prevent suicide by veterans. Obviously, if someone giving a speech at West Point wants to translate it into Swedish, that's probably not a high-risk use. Then you have stuff at the other end, developing a nuclear weapon, clearly against your policies. But there's so much in the middle. There's so much that is not building a bomb. It's not destroying property, which is another one you have that's not allowed, but that could be really harmful. I mean, these AI engines are incredibly, capable persuasion engines. How do you draw the line of what a military can and can't do? And do you think that's the right place?
One of the things that we believe very deeply is that society and this technology have to co-evolve. We believe in iterative deployment a lot for the obvious reason, which is that people need time to gradually update and think and figure out what the rules should be. But there's another part, which is you can't separate the technology from the world. You can't just, even if you get everything magically right, you can't build it in secret and then put it in the world all at once, because the world is going to keep changing with each iteration, which means on those middle cases, I don't know what the right answer is yet, nor does anyone, because no one has really thought through and seen how the institutions and the world and society shift and reshape in response to this. So there will be a lot of things that we'll have to start slowly on and iterate as we go. And there will be a lot of middle cases. But we do want to support the US government and other governments too. And I find it odd that everyone thinks this is a big gotcha question where they're going to say, wait, are you saying you support the US government? And my answer is just yes.
One of the interesting things about this technology, I was having a conversation in the Congress Hall with one of your fellow pioneers in the field, is the idea, we've had past platforms, the PC didn't really come with a built-in set of values. The smartphone didn't really come with a set of values. Inherent in these large language models and other generative AI systems, you're making value choices, both in what data you train on, very heavily in the alignment layer, the layer where you say this is allowed, this isn't, how will I respond to this kind of question, what questions won't I expand on, and what questions will I say, sorry, I can't answer that. One of the interesting things is right now we have different systems in the US and China, but we kind of have the idea, and I think OpenAI's is, you're building a system for the rest of the world, right? Do you think we'll be able to have one GPT, add your number to it, that really satisfies that? Or when you look at a country like one of the countries in the Middle East, are they going to be comfortable with the kind of system you've built?
I think there will have to be some global standards. And one thing I'm excited about is the technology itself, I think, can help us do that. You can imagine GPT and talking to all of its users to really understand their value, preferences, relative trade-offs, the nuance of that, and then doing something that actually represents all of the people that want to use this model. There will be a question of defaults. There will be a question of what the wide bounds of permissions possibilities are. Like what can you get a system to say? What can it never say? How much room do you have to customize it for yourself? And we'll see this at many levels. So there will be versions by countries, different cultures, individual people. And I think the answer there is going to be to allow quite a lot of individual customization, and that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable.
And does that mean OpenAI is comfortable to go into, I don't want to pick on an individual country because my hope is that they all expand their human rights, but there's a lot of countries that don't, for example, respect LGBTQ rights. If country X said, in order to operate in our country, you have to change the way OpenAI's models answer questions about that, is that something you're willing to do?
I mean, if like, again, in this idea of like a broad, what the absolute constraints are, if the country said, all gay people should be killed on sight, then no. We would say this is like, I hope anything that the world, the people of the world would come to as a principle would say that is well out of bounds. But there are probably other things that I don't personally agree with that a different culture might about gay people that, the model should still be able to say. And I think like it is not we have to be somewhat uncomfortable as a tool builder here with some of the uses of our tools and not, and again, there are things where I think we can just say we draw a line here, absolutely.
But if I'm hearing right, you do foresee a world in which OpenAI's models might answer a question differently in different countries based on their values.
I would say more than that, it'll be for different users with different values, which, the country's issue I think is somewhat less important, but also
But a lot of
could be the
countries
case.
aren't comfortable with the users choosing what they get to, and it's not just the US
Is the
and
question
China.
here like, will we respect other governments?
Will you, it's come before. I mean, Google decided not to do business in China because
Yeah, and there are
much.
countries where we decide not to do business. But there are a lot of governments who I think have different beliefs than us, where we can still say there's enough common ground here. We're heading towards a lot of the same values. Let's work together.
All right, we have a few minutes left. I'm going to move into the lightning round, smart brevity we love. When you returned, you said you were hopeful that you would find a good role for Ilya and that things would continue. Have you found that role?
No update yet.
So is he working at OpenAI?
I don't know what the exact status of that is. I love Ilya. I think Ilya is like an unbelievable person and researcher. It's, obviously it's a sort of a traumatic event to go through, but I'm very hopeful. I care about him a great deal.
Whether or not it was one of the factors that led the board to do what it did, one of the criticisms of you, and there were a few criticisms of you during that time, was that, there's all this stuff that OpenAI is doing. Why are you off, raising money for startups, building other things? Why aren't you spending 100% of your time on these big issues that are confronting OpenAI? Why are you continuing to raise money for things that aren't OpenAI and invest?
There are OpenAI, I think there was this misrepresentation, not hard to guess by who, but that I was like off in the Middle East raising money for this chip effort, and that it was somehow like a SAM project. It was like an OpenAI project that the board had decided was a clear strategic priority, and it's not a separate thing. So I'm not gonna go try to like fight everything in the press because you all will do your thing, and I respect that. but that was like wildly misreported. These are critical to OpenAI efforts. I don't invest much in personal startups anymore. I don't invest personally much in startups. I do support the ones that I invested in previous to this.
Things like with the AI pin and Humane.
Yeah. So that one's now gotten. I wouldn't do another round there because that's gotten way too close to OpenAI. But in general, if there's like a startup that I supported and they're raising more money, I try to like continue to support. But like I don't think of myself as an investor anymore. I have like some ongoing obligations, but like this is what I'm doing. OpenAI is what I'm doing.
I'm wearing these glasses. They have an AI assistant built in. You've talked a lot.
I find this very strange for what it's worth.
Yeah, me too. Who here finds this normal? Not seeing a lot of hands, but we wanted to try it out. I mean, I think that's one of the most interesting things, and this has come up around OpenAI. You know, there's debate, should you release it publicly or not? I personally am kind of glad that these models did arrive when they did, because again, the rate of change is so fast. If we don't start getting our heads around it.
That was our thought. I mean, that is the whole reason we have the strategy of iterative deployment. And I think we've been right so far to do this.
Another question that is totally on the minds of everyone I'm talking to here. So again, last year the CEOs were like, oh my God, ChatGPT. This year, they're much more, how am I going to incorporate generative AI into what I do, into everything I do? Where do I start? What are some of the things you tell both the companies that work with OpenAI, or what would your advice be to the C-suite folks who are here trying to get their heads around AI?
One thing that I think gets missed a lot, so I'll try to say the less obvious thing, is using this for internal productivity at a company is a huge deal. Everyone's focused on how do I integrate this into my products and services, and that's all good. But I think, like, how can I make my internal workflow more efficient? How can I like let my software developers get access to a fine-tuned model of GPT-4 on our own code base? It requires a new way of thinking, but I think that's like easy winnings for everybody.
Lastly, what aren't we talking enough about? What do you wish more ink was being spilled about, more pixels?
I think the infrastructure investments that the world is going to have to make to deliver AI at the scale that people want it.
And that is going to mean a lot more computers, a lot more chips. Which pieces are ready and which pieces are not?
None of the pieces are ready at the scale we're going to need.